Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission here is, well, to take these big, often complicated bodies of work. Sometimes they're hidden away, sometimes just buried in info,
Mhm.
and we try to break them down.
Right, into the stuff that really matters, the core knowledge.
Exactly. And today, we're definitely strapping in. This might be one of the most, let's say, intellectually compelling and definitely hotly debated deep dives we've tackled.
Oh, yeah. It's a real rabbit hole, this one. You've got planetary science, you've got ancient history, myths.
And that layer of institutional secrecy which always adds spice.
It's kind of the perfect storm of sources, really.
Couldn't agree more. We are diving into the core claims of Chan Thomas's, well, notorious work, The Adam and Eve Story, The History of Cataclysms. And if you've spent any time looking this up online, you know the immediate hook isn't just the theory itself, wild as it is, it's the whole story around it.
The lore.
Yeah, the lore. This thing gained massive notoriety because apparently a specific copy was heavily redacted, blacked out.
And then later partially released by a major intelligence agency, the CIA no less.
Right, the CIA.
And that changes the game, doesn't it? That institutional nod, whether it was, genuine worry or just them covering bases, it pulls the theory out of the, let's say, the fringe section of the library.
And throws it right into the global spotlight, instantly makes you ask, why? Why did they care?
Exactly that question.
And that's where we're focusing today. Our goal isn't to get lost debating if the specific CIA documents are the real deal or whatever. We want to extract the fundamental ideas.
The conceptual framework?
Yeah.
What did Thomas actually claim happened?
Yes. What was the mechanism? How fast did it happen? What evidence did he point to? And crucially, what did he say the ultimate consequences were for, well, us, for human evolution?
So separating the theory's actual content from the whole digital hunt for the complete text.
Precisely. We're peeling back the layers of internet searching and CIA mystery to get to the core claims. Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay, so to really get why there's so much fuss, we kind of need to define the work itself first, the Adam and Eve story.
Right. What is it, fundamentally?
At its heart, it's proposing this theory of recurring global cataclysms. We're talking events so massive, they basically hit the reset button on human civilization.
Reset button. That's a good way to put it. It definitely falls into the realm of conspiracy and catastrophism theories, right?
Absolutely. It argues for these cyclical disruptions, and crucially, it ties them to a specific physical mechanism happening to the Earth itself.
And this is where the whole search for the text itself becomes part of the story, this unredacted quest, as we're calling it.
Right, because you can find versions of this book out there, published versions.
But they have different page counts.
Oh.
That's the weird thing. We know some common ones, easily available, are around, 232 pages? Maybe a bit less.
Exactly. And that's the nub of it, the specific, kind of legendary, unredacted version that people are always searching for online.
The one they think has the real secrets.
Yeah, the one that supposedly contains the missing geopolitical stuff, or maybe even predictions. That one is often cited as being 298 pages long.
298 versus maybe 232. So what's it? 66 pages difference, roughly?
Which sounds like maybe not a huge amount, but it's enough.
It's enough to fuel the entire mystery. It implies, maybe 2 whole chapters or several really dense sections with critical info.
Were deliberately cut out, suppressed.
And that belief is what keeps people digging, searching for the full text, the uncensored digital copy, hoping it holds the key.
And this leads us straight back to why the book is famous in the first place, that CIA connection.
Right. Our source material is pretty clear on this. It became well known largely because of that heavily redacted copy, the one the agency later partially released.
And this isn't just like internet rumor. It's not anecdotal. That document, it's public record.
You can actually go find it. For context, you can access the redacted CIA document through their official online reading room. It's there.
And that level of official involvement, even just redacting it, gives Thomas's theory a kind of weight, a gravity that most other fringe theories just don't have.
It means someone in the U.S. government back in the 60s thought the claims in this book, true or not, were sensitive enough to slap a classification on it and go through the whole redaction process.
Which, if you're investigating this topic, that official stamp makes you pause. Why would a national security agency care about a theory on, ancient history and geology?
The only answer that really makes sense is that the theory must contain something, maybe a prediction, maybe a mechanism that they thought could I don't know, shake public confidence?
Or challenge the established narratives if people really started believing it, something potentially disruptive.
Right. It shifts your focus, doesn't it? From, is this theory actually true? To, okay, what kind of claim would be so severe that a major intelligence agency felt the need to hide parts of it?
And the answer has to be tied to the sheer scale of the event Thomas is describing, the severity. That's the link between the CIA mystery and the actual science, or pseudoscience, in the book.
If they redacted it, the thinking goes, it must be because the implications. Well, if it were somehow accurate,
Hmm.
they would totally change how we view our own survival, our future.
Absolutely. This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, so let's pivot a bit. Move beyond the who redacted what and really focus on the physics, or the proposed physics anyway. If we're doing a proper deep dive, we need the technical blueprint.
Right. What's the nuts and bolts of the disaster Chan Thomas actually describes?
What's the fundamental geological idea behind these recurring global catastrophes he talks about?
Okay, at its absolute core, Thomas describes what he calls a catastrophic pole shift. And this is really important. It's fundamentally different from other concepts people might know, like magnetic pole drift.
Or just normal plate tectonics, continents moving slowly.
Exactly. This is way more radical. He basically says the Earth, periodically, undergoes a complete crustal displacement.
Okay, hang on. Complete crustal displacement. We need to unpack that because that's where he really goes off the mainstream geology path, right?
Totally. Conventional geology sees the Earth's crust as, mostly anchored to the mantle below it. It moves, yes, but incredibly slowly over millions of years through plate tectonics.
Like giant rafts grinding against each other.
Right. But Thomas paints a different picture. Imagine the Earth like an orange. The peel is the crust, thin and on the outside.
Okay.
Conventional view, the peel is stuck pretty tight to the fruit inside, maybe moves a tiny bit here and there, Thomas's view. That peel, the Earth's crust, isn't firmly attached. It can actually slip entirely over the mantle underneath.
The whole shell slides. So the inside part, the mantle, that big hot layer under the crust, it keeps spinning like normal.
Right, rotationally stable.
But the thin outer crust suddenly breaks free, loses its grip.
That's the core mechanism he proposes. The Earth's crust slides independently over that viscous, sort of semi-liquid, but essentially stationary mantle beneath it. And that sliding, that's what triggers everything else.
And the immediate result of that slip is the geographic poles move. Like North Pole ends up where Florida was or something.
Essentially, yes. The entire surface grid shifts violently relative to the axis of rotation. Where we are right now might have been near the equator or near a pole just one cycle ago, according to him.
Wow, okay.
But here's the most audacious part, the real linchpin of the whole theory. It's the speed.
This isn't happening over millions of years.
Not even close. The timeline Thomas proposes isn't geological time. He describes the shift as rapid, extremely rapid, happening in hours.
In hours. Okay, let's just let that sink in. Hours.
Yeah.
The entire surface of the planet, all the continents, all the oceans on top, changing their position relative to the spin axis in less time than a long plane flight.
That's the claim. And that speed, well, it implies forces that are just monumental, almost unimaginable.
It really does. I mean, just thinking about the physics needed for that, for the Earth's crust to just overcome all the inertia, all the friction holding it to the mantle.
And do that in mere hours. The energy involved would have to be absolutely incomprehensible. Mainstream science would say the friction alone makes it impossible.
So Thomas must be implying something overcomes that friction, right? Does he explain what? Like maybe too much ice builds up at the poles, throws the rotation off balance, or some kind of weird resonance?
He doesn't necessarily nail down the exact trigger in the parts we have access to, but the implication is clear. Something causes the friction and resistance between the crust and mantle to drop, effectively almost to zero, for a brief, catastrophic period.
Allowing the crust to just slide free.
Exactly. But then you have to ask, what happens to the atmosphere? And the oceans? They're spinning along nicely with the planet on its old axis.
Right. They have momentum. They're not going to instantly adjust to the ground underneath them, suddenly moving thousands of miles in a different direction.
Precisely. They keep going, essentially, based on the old rotation. So if the ground under the air moves, say, eastwards really, really fast, the air is going to feel like a colossal wind blowing westwards.
And the oceans, too. They'd slosh massively.
That's the source of the annihilation. The atmosphere and oceans reacting violently to the ground shifting beneath them. The sheer speed of the shift is what causes the devastation.
It's all about inertia, kinetic energy transfer on a planetary scale.
You got it. The shift forces the surface from one rotational state to another almost instantly, and all that rotational energy gets converted into destructive kinetic energy, wind, waves, friction across the entire planet.
Okay, so let's move from the why, this incredibly rapid crustal shift happening in hours,
Yeah.
to the what, the immediate devastating effects Thomas described.
Yeah, because if the cause takes only hours, the consequences have got to be simultaneous, global, and just overwhelming.
Designed to be total annihilation, basically.
Pretty much. The destructive forces he details are the planet's physical response, geological, atmospheric, hydrological, to that sudden change in inertia we talked about.
And the first big one he mentions is wind, right? But not just strong wind.
No. Massive supersonic winds.
Supersonic.
Yeah.
Okay, faster than the speed of sound. What's that, roughly? Set it up. 760-something miles per hour at sea level.
Around that, yeah. So try to picture air moving that fast everywhere, all at once.
What does that even do to the surface?
The kinetic energy is just staggering. It wouldn't just be like a hurricane knocking things over. It would be more like vaporization. A supersonic pressure wave carries immense heat and force.
So buildings, trees, mountains.
Anything rigid, skyscrapers, yeah, forests, even granite formations, maybe smaller hills.
Yeah.
They'd be subjected to forces that would either flatten them instantly or shear them off completely. It would leave behind this scoured landscape, polished or just obliterated.
Wow. The entire surface of the planet essentially sandblasted clean by its own atmosphere trying to catch up.
That's a good way to visualize it. And while the air is doing that, creating these global supersonic shock waves, the water is reacting maybe even more violently.
The tidal waves. This is probably the image most people remember, or that grabs them.
Right. Thomas focuses heavily on these colossal tidal waves generated by the crust shifting under the oceans.
And the description is just mind-boggling. He says they'd be up to 2 miles high.
2 miles high. Let's just pause on that scale for a second.
Yeah, it says what, over 10,000 feet?
Over 10,500 feet. We're not talking about a big tsunami from an earthquake, which might hit 100 feet, maybe 150 in extreme cases. This is a global wall of water.
Taller than almost any mountain range that isn't the Himalayas or the Andes. It would sweep over continents.
Effortlessly. Coastal ranges, inland cities.
Yep.
Nothing stands a chance. And that kind of height, again, it's only really plausible if the shift is incredibly rapid.
Because if the crust moves slowly, the oceans would just sort of gradually adjust their level.
Exactly. But the in-hours timeline means the entire mass of the world's oceans gets effectively slammed to one side by the crust moving underneath. Think of water sloshing violently in a bowl if you suddenly tilt it.
Except the bowl is the planet, and the slosh is 2 miles high.
The water's inertia, plus maybe immense friction at the ocean floor during the slip. It leads to this unbelievable displacement. Thomas argues this guarantees the complete flooding of pretty much all land masses. Total inundation.
Wiping the slate clean, hydrologically speaking.
The ultimate reset by water. But it doesn't stop there. It's not just wind and water. Thomas also talks about heat and cold simultaneously.
Right, the dual thermal effect. Massive volcanic eruptions happening at the same time as instant freezing. How does that work?
Well, think about the crust sliding over the mantle in just hours. The friction, the stress on the crust itself, it would be unimaginable.
Ripping open fault lines everywhere.
Exactly. Triggering intense volcanic activity on a global scale. So you'd have supervolcanoes erupting, massive lava flows, localized zones of intense heat melting everything.
Okay, so parts of the planet are boiling, but then freezing.
At the same time. Because the rapid shift means areas that were maybe warm, temperate, near the old equator, they get violently shoved into what become the new polar regions.
Ah, so the climate zones don't have time to catch up with the geography.
Precisely. The planet's surface is repositioned way too fast for any kind of thermal equilibrium, and the atmosphere, maybe already scoured clean by the winds and filled with volcanic dust, could dump its moisture incredibly quickly, leading to instant freezing across huge areas that just became polar.
Like the mammoths in Siberia.
That's the kind of evidence he points to. Yeah, we'll get to that. But the result is this chaotic planet simultaneously on fire with volcanoes and flash-frozen solid in other places.
So you take all that together, the supersonic winds, the 2-mile-high waves, the volcanic heat, the instant cold.
It's a recipe for total planetary sterilization, basically. It ensures, as Thomas puts it, an effective resetting of civilization to a new Stone Age for the few survivors.
So what does this all mean? It means the theory isn't just about a disaster, it's about a mechanism powerful enough to explain why, potentially, entire advanced civilizations could vanish without a trace. repeatedly.
Right. So given that level of total destruction we just described, wiping the slate completely clean, Thomas then needs to argue this wasn't just a one-off freak event.
He needs to show it happens again and again, predictably.
Exactly. He has to provide some kind of evidence that this is a recurring cyclical planetary process. Otherwise, it's just a wild disaster story.
And he gives a time frame for this cycle, doesn't he? A very specific frequency. It's not random. It's like clockwork in his theory.
He does. Thomas claims these cataclysms happen approximately every 6,000 to 7,000 years.
6,000 to 7,000 years. Now, why that specific number? Why is that window so important for his argument? Why not say every 100,000 years or every million?
Well, think about it. That 6,000 to 7,000 year window is strategically useful, let's say.
How so?
It places the last major cataclysm right around the time of, well, the dawn of recorded human history, the end of the last ice age, the time when our current cycle of civilization seemed to kick off.
Ah, okay. So it aligns with archaeological and historical timelines we sort of recognize.
Perfectly. It creates this recurring threat that fits just within the edge of human cultural memory, or at least mythology.
Because if the cycle was, say, 100,000 years, we'd have no cultural memory of the last one. It'd be lost in deep prehistory.
Right. And if it happened, say, only 1,000 years ago, modern archaeology and geology should see blindingly obvious, indisputable proof of total global destruction very recently, which we generally don't.
So that 6,000, 7,000 year ban is narrow enough to link the destruction directly to the mysteries of why civilizations seem to suddenly appear and potentially disappear in prehistory.
Precisely. It allows him to connect his mechanism to existing puzzles. Now, how does he try to support this specific cyclical claim? He uses roughly 3 main categories of evidence. Think of them as his nexus access points.
Okay. What's the first one?
First, he points to the fact that almost every culture around the world seems to have ancient flood myths, great deluge stories.
Right, like Noah's flood in the Bible is the most famous one in the West, but there are countless others.
Exactly. He cites evidence from these worldwide accounts, the Epic of Gilgamesh in Mesopotamia, flood stories from indigenous peoples in the Americas, China, India, everywhere.
And his argument is, these aren't just local floods being exaggerated.
His argument is they're too similar, too widespread across cultures that supposedly had no contact to be mere coincidence or local events. He argues the scale described in these myths, overwhelming, world-ending floods, only really makes sense if they're distorted cultural memories of the last pole shift's 2-mile-high tidal waves.
So the myths are echoes of a real, global, physical event.
That's the claim. The collective trauma passed down as legend.
Okay, interesting. What's the second category of evidence? Myths are one thing, but...
Right, he needs something more concrete, physical. So second, he moves to geological anomalies, things that mainstream science maybe struggles to explain easily. And the most famous example here is the flash-frozen mammoths.
Yes, the Siberian mammoths. We touched on this.
This is a really crucial piece for him because it directly supports the speed of the catastrophe that in hours timeline.
How so? What's the specific detail about the mammoths?
Well, as you know, woolly mammoths have been found preserved in the Siberian permafrost. But some of them aren't just frozen, they seem to be flash frozen. The key indicator is finding undigested food, things like fresh grass, buttercups, other vegetation still perfectly preserved in their stomachs and even mouths.
Right. Which means...
It means they died and were frozen solid incredibly quickly. For a huge animal like a mammoth to freeze so fast that its digestive processes didn't even have time to break down the food in its stomach, well, the temperature must have plummeted catastrophically.
By maybe 100 degrees or more in just hours. Minutes, even.
That's the implication. A sudden, violent, deep freeze. This kind of perfect biological preservation, Thomas argues, can't be explained by a slow climate change or just dying and gradually freezing over winter. It points to an instantaneous environmental shift.
So he uses the mammoths as Exhibit A for the rapid climate change caused by a pole shift, a temperate region suddenly becoming Arctic, literally overnight.
Exactly. It's his prime physical evidence for the violence and speed of the shift. Instant death, instant freezing.
Okay. Myths, geology.
What?
That's the third nexus point.
The third category is a bit more vague, but it involves referencing ancient texts.
Meaning specific known texts or something more mysterious.
The source material usually just refers to them as unidentified ancient texts. The suggestion seems to be that there might be obscure, perhaps lost, or even deliberately suppressed records, maybe astronomical, maybe geological from previous civilizations?
Records that actually documented these cycles.
That seems to be the implication, that the knowledge of the 6,000 to 7,000 year frequency was known in antiquity, perhaps by survivors of the previous cycle, and this knowledge was preserved by a select few, maybe hidden within certain texts or traditions.
Okay, so it's a bit more speculative, relying on the idea of lost knowledge.
Definitely more speculative than the mammoths, yeah. But you see the overall strategy. He's taking global myths, specific geological puzzles, and hints of lost ancient wisdom.
And weaving them together, synthesizing them into one unified narrative.
Exactly. It's designed to build this comprehensive case that directly challenges the standard timelines and explanations of both science and history. What's fascinating, regardless of whether you buy it, is how he connects these really diverse dots, mythology, geology, esoteric history, to make the argument seem cohesive.
All right, so we've got the mechanism the crust slips in hours. We've got the devastating effects, winds, waves, fire, ice. And we've got the proposed cycle every 6,000 to 7,000 years, backed by myths and mammoths.
Right. We've established the destruction and the recurrence.
So now what happens after? What about the survivors? There are always supposed to be a few survivors, right? The ones who have to start over in that new Stone Age.
That's the next crucial part of the theory. It shifts focus from the planet itself to the biology of the survivors. And this is where Thomas introduces a really unique and frankly highly speculative biological element.
Okay, beyond just surviving the chaos.
Yeah. He has this claim about genetic changes happening because of the cataclysm. It's sometimes called the weakening shield hypothesis.
Weakening shield. What shield is he talking about? Earth's magnetic field.
That seems the most likely interpretation. The magnetosphere, the invisible shield generated by the molten iron moving in Earth's outer core.
Right, the thing that protects us from most cosmic rays, solar wind, nasty radiation from space.
Exactly. It deflects most of those harmful, high-energy particles. So Thomas's idea starts with, what does a massive traumatic event like the entire crust slipping do to that shield generator deep inside the Earth?
Does it disrupt it? Weaken it?
That's the hypothesis. The immense stress, the friction, maybe even slight disruptions to the core's rotation during the event. Thomas posits that the cataclysms cause a temporary but significant weakening of Earth's protective shields, both during the event and maybe for some time afterward.
Okay, so the shield goes down, or at least gets weaker. What does that mean for the few survivors huddled together on this wrecked planet?
It means they're suddenly exposed to a massive increase in cosmic radiation, solar radiation, all the stuff the shield normally blocks.
So on top of everything else, freezing temperatures, no food, volcanoes, they're also getting bombarded with radiation.
That's the idea. It transforms the aftermath from just a physical survival challenge into a fundamental biological one as well.
And this is where the genetic changes come in. What does Thomas theorize this radiation bath actually does to the survivor's DNA?
This is probably the most startling part of the post-cataclysm theory. He proposes that this intense radiation exposure causes substantial and unexpected genetic changes.
Not just like radiation sickness, but actual changes to the human genome.
More than just damage. The implication is mass, rapid mutations occurring within that small, surviving gene pool.
Wow, okay, that's a huge leap. So the pole shift isn't just wiping the slate clean environmentally and culturally.
It's acting as a kind of forced evolutionary mechanism, a global genetic accelerator.
Yeah. The cataclysm itself is fundamentally altering the biology of the survivors who will go on to repopulate the planet.
That seems to be the core of this part of the theory. It provides a mechanism, however speculative, to explain how, after near total annihilation, new human populations might arise relatively quickly, perhaps with different traits or adaptations, forming the basis of the next cycle's civilizations.
So the survivors aren't just Stone Age people with the same old genes. They are chemically, genetically modified by the very event that destroyed their world.
That's the proposition. It connects the periodic destruction to a periodic biological restart or redirection.
It ties everything together, in a way. It offers a terrifyingly complete explanation for why our deep history might look like these cycles of sudden advancement, followed by apparent collapse and then restarting. A total civilizational and biological reset every 6,000 to 7,000 years.
It makes the whole process seem almost purposeful in a grim, planetary way. The planet itself dictates not just when civilization ends, but also the biological template for the next one.
It's a cycle of cosmic horror, almost. Physics demands annihilation, and the resulting chaos genetically re-engineers the survivors, forcing them to rebuild from a primitive state. but maybe it's slightly different humans.
It reframes the whole pole shift idea. It's not just a potential disaster looming. It's presented as a continuous, unavoidable condition of life on Earth, inherent in the planet's mechanics.
If you connect that to the bigger picture, it kind of suggests human civilization as we know it is just this temporary phase, a recurring bloom that's destined to be wiped clean and then replanted by the planet's own geological and radiative processes.
Yeah, our entire history becomes just one iteration in this long, repeating pattern governed by a cosmic clock that resets every 6 or 7 millennia.
Makes all our accomplishments feel, well, profoundly temporary, and the threat feel genuinely inescapable if you accept the premise. Hashtag outro.
Okay. So that brings us to the end of this particular deep dive. We've really tried to lay out the core conceptual framework of Chan Thomas's work.
Yeah, we've covered the central mechanism he proposed, that rapid crustal displacement happening in hours, which, we should stress, mainstream science finds highly improbable due to basic physics like friction and inertia.
Right. And we quantified the sheer terrifying scale of the predicted annihilation, those supersonic winds, the 2-mile-high tidal waves essentially scouring the planet.
We also tracked the cycle, that recurring 6,000 to 7,000 year pattern, and the kind of evidence he used to support it, like the global flood myths and those really intriguing flash-frozen mammoths.
And finally, we touched on that speculative biological element, the idea of a post-cataclysm genetic reset caused by weakened planetary shields and increased radiation.
So hopefully this deep dive has given you, our listener, the complete conceptual toolkit. You now understand the fundamental claims, the proposed mechanics, the alleged evidence, and the ultimate implications of the theory.
Regardless of whether you ever find that elusive 298-page version, you now grasp the core ideas that caused such a stir and significantly attracted the attention of an agency like the CIA. You understand the gravity of what Thomas was claiming.
It is definitely a powerful and, audacious narrative. And the fact that this theory just persists, that it continues to fascinate so many people, it really does suggest a deep-seated human curiosity, maybe even anxiety, about the possibility of these kinds of catastrophic resets. Are we stable? Or are we just waiting for the next cycle?
Which leads us to a final thought, a question for you to maybe mull over, building directly on the material we've discussed.
Good.
Given Thomas's core claim of these recurring cycles, specifically the 6,000 to 7,000 year time frame, and given the kinds of geological evidence he cited, like things suggesting instantaneous change, what specific evidence, if you saw it emerging in our modern world right now, what would truly count as a definitive, indisputable sign that we might actually be nearing the end of one of Thomas's proposed cycles?
Good question. Would it be like measurable instability in the Earth's magnetic field suddenly getting much worse?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or perhaps seeing a sudden, dramatically accelerating shift in polar ice balance, something that could point to that rotational imbalance Thomas hinted might precede the crustal slip. What signs would convince you that the clock might be ticking down?
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.